Enjoy yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, our apologies for the late start. I am grateful to Anne-Margaret Lim and Millicent Graham for accepting my invitation as Poet Laureate. My 3-year appointment began in April of this year. I will be working in collaboration with the National Library, for whose assistance I am very grateful. This is the second reading in a mini-series of 3. Last Sunday in Portland, the readers were Tanya Shirley and Edward Bowe. Next Thursday, the 27th, the readers will be Jean Goldman and Earl Mackenzie at the Cecil Charlton Hall in Mandeville. We hope to do more readings in January and February next year. One of the aims is to offer as often as possible readings outside of Kingston. In addition to these readings, we hope to persuade some of our poets to accept invitations from schools. But of course we need to get the invitations. The hope is that the poet will meet with a class of 30 or 40 students rather than a larger assembly, and after reading briefly, we'll attempt to have a dialogue with the students and will answer their questions. So, if you're at a school that has a class that might like to see a live poet, would you please write to me, care of the National Library, giving details of where you are and what you hope for, and we will get back to you. Now this evening, our readers are, as I've said, Anne-Margaret Lim and Millicent Graham. There is some information on the back of your programs, but I will repeat some of it. Anne-Margaret Lim has been writing for a while and been publishing in journals and anthologies. Her book so far is The Festival of Wild Orchid, which was published by People Tree in 2012. It won a first book nomination from the UK Guardian, and it was on the Bocas Prize Poetry long list. Anne-Margaret has also achieved, a bit earlier, being shortlisted in the Small Axe Literary Competition, and she has received a highly recommended award in the National Development Council of Jamaica book competition. I am pleased to invite to read the author of The Festival of Wild Orchid, Anne-Margaret Lim.
Hi, I think it's a froggy night, so I have my tea. Bookophilia. It's now the home of great poetry in Jamaica, right? When we're not in Calabash. First one I'm going to do is the Festival of Wild Orchid, the title poem from my book. You know, when people ask me why this cover, I just basically point them to the poem. The Festival of Wild Orchid. It was death, riding the ocean in a tomb of bodies. So she howled an ancestor waking howl to her grandmother's spirit in the trees, who, stripped bare, begged the West Indies to fit her granddaughter with wild orchid leaves and the hardiness of a tree. A tree stands bare, naked, like the first African woman to stand on this island, with a swelling ocean for a tongue and a cry that stripped the trees of all the leaves. Mark it. It is a festival of wild orchid. Scale. Yeah, I mean, I'm a mom, so I have to prepare food for my daughter. So this one is scale. I scrape the knife over the skin of the dead fish, and scales fly into the air, then fall like shells into the heap of leaves below. But they are not shells, they are layers, snippets of pictures that as I scale are set in motion like a reel. Each scale part of a scene. A Taino's blood draining down to the leaves, a bald African struck down to her knees. Each scale part of the ocean, of the sea that brought me here by the heap, scaling fish on this red hills. That's where I live. Grandmommy. Grandmommy's mommy was a Puerto Rican, and as grandmommy say, her daddy was a true blood Coromantine man. Grandmommy say I remind her of her Puerto Rican mommy, the way I turn in front of the mirror and fix my hair like so and so. She used to say, "It's same way so your great grandmommy used to turn, with her little waist and her long hair in front of the mirror. I fix her face." Grandmommy's mommy was a Puerto Rican, and as grandmommy said, her daddy was a true blood Coromantine man. And when my grandmommy come from foreign, she sit and spin and pedal the sewing machine, make skirt and frock and blouse. They are little Coromantine, quarter Chinese, Puerto Rican girl. Now, I have, her body hair is mixed up and stuff like that. Hey Sean, what's up? Tasio, Kayla is inside. Alright, so this is leaves. I'm in the bus with the other press officers, and there's an old woman raking leaves. As they fall, there's an old man raking leaves. As they fall, he collects them. This is November, autumn in China, when leaves fall and there are trees near the road. But no leaf, it seems, stays long enough for you to remember it there on the road. What stays is the old man raking leaves, collecting them as they fall. And I think I see why Popo, who hopped the boat from China to the island, rakes leaves. Morning, evening. Popo is a Hakka dialect in China for grandma. Request. You'd stand in front of the stove and make mi chang, boiling the sugar with some lime juice for 2 hours till it's a sticky syrup. Then you'd pour it on the bed of Rice Krispies and roller-pinned peanuts laid out on the grease paper beach. You'd wait for it to set, then cut it into squares. My daughter, Kayla, loves Rice Krispies treats, which tries to replicate, but doesn't. Marshmallow alone isn't enough to compensate for the loss of peanuts. I know it doesn't always set, but Grandma, Popo, can you make mi chang? Kayla hasn't tasted it yet. Now, Cesar Vallejo was, poets don't really die, do they? If you make it. So is from Peru, and he had a poem that's called The Nine Monsters, and there's a section of the poem that goes like this. Mr. Minister of Health, what to do? Unfortunately, human men, there is, brothers, too much to do. Dear Cesar Vallejo, in Jamaica, our collective anger is like the sea. It undulates, then eventually goes under. like the 9-day wonder, or more precisely, somehow straightens out like the crushes of waves that straighten out into nothingness, like cloth ironed out on the board below in front of us. And my grandmother is a dead fish, an unknown, uncounted statistic whose heart couldn't manage the viruses rampage on her body that had gone 81, but was strong before, that is. My grandmother, transplanted from China, was thrown under the bus like the rest of us, who never knew how susceptible we were, since Mom was the word and the people lacked knowledge and perished. So in Jamaica, Mr. Vallejo, government is the one who stands at the board above the crinkled cloth, and the cloth whose anger is ironed over or goes under like the waves at sea is us. And government too is God in heaven. Alright, so this one is to my father. And the moon up in the sky tonight? No, because it's, what? Is there a moon tonight? No? Not seen any? Clouds hiding? Alright. The moon hangs like the eye of a wolf in a vast sky. The world sleeps, and I, with the tick of the clock, am up, with a petulant stomach, thoughts that let in my head, my heart, my lungs, strained by a draft, that in this still night of the wolf-eye moon, I fear will take me out like Keats coughing up everything. In this night when death seems a breath of, eyeing the words on this sheet, I write of you, of the time your father died and you charged in the room where I hung the grease paper and bamboo fish he made me with his own hands that traveled from China, dragged it down like a hideous painting, a dirty curtain, flung it in the heap, flung it on the heap, doused with kerosene, lit it, and stood there watching it burn, while I stood unknown behind you, watching you burn the one thing I had of him. In this night when the wolf-eye moon hangs and death seems a breath off with the air beating these scarred lungs, I remember too the pilgrimage in Havendale, on the way to the garage, the lessons you passed on like water from pipe to cupped hands. And I remember the sky bright blue and unclouded as I was on that walk when you held my hand. Alright, I'm going to read this poem, Red Sweater. I actually brought the sweater, but you know what? Poets make images, right? So I don't need to show you the sweater. For Daddy. There's a red sweater in my closet. It's also a tracksuit top with 2 white stripes running down the sleeves. Sometimes when I feel its polyester skin, I travel to a December day in the 1980s when the wind owned the streets. And Daddy loaned me his red tracksuit top with the white stripes running down the sleeves for school. I felt grown and cool like Daddy in his red sweater tracksuit top with the white stripes and the zip I kept playing with. The zip still works. The sweater looks new, like the memory of you putting me in your tracksuit top. I close my eyes, and I'm back on the playground, proud with your cool tracksuit top with the white stripes running down the sleeves. Daddy, your red tracksuit top in my closet is like the tiara little princess's treasure. A memory bank I go to take me back to when we were better at being father and daughter. I want to big up Ambassador Matthew Joey. I see you really love literature. Alright, Blue You. I considered whether or not to do this one because I'm not sure if it's complete. But, you know, I should do a poem on my mother. I think that it may make more sense if you read it in a collection around other mother poems, but here goes. I tripped this morning on a piece of you. I swallowed the yellow moon and then I wake. Surprise, surprise, a piece of you was blue. Alone in the bone white walls of my working mew. The clock pricks and I sit and chew. For what sake I tripped this morning on a piece of you. Yesterday when I was stirring my brew, there was a piece of you under a brown bran flake. Surprise, surprise, a piece of you was blue. In the record, I'm the record stuck at the memory of you. I'm hollow now, I'm Joan. Raised at the stake, I tripped this morning on a piece of you. In the yard, a piece of you peeped through the heap of leaves under the hand of my rake. Surprise, surprise, a piece of you was blue. I am the horse they found who's lost a shoe. Here, no solid ground to drive in a stake. I tripped this morning on a piece of you. Surprise, surprise, the piece of you was blue. Brother. At 9, I picked flowers for your birthday, wishing you playing in the garden with me or on the veranda, taking the ladders of the fire truck, arranging them to rescue the child trapped in the room. At 17, I come home from the tent crusade, clutching the hope for a miracle, like a crystal in my hand that drops and splinters when I see you still as you were before the crusade. At 24, I stand in the morgue of the hospital, the same one you were born in, and they screwed up again. A girl shares your cold chamber, but I resent more your botched delivery. Norvin, when you died, I walked in a whirlwind. Your father, glass, splintered and senseless, barring me and your mother from the cremation. So that for more than a year, she opened and closed oven doors, putting the beginnings of puddings, pies, tarts in, taking them out, completed. Sometimes I see you, once as a boy at a school I taught, the same living hair cut close to the scalp. The same smile opening your face. Norvin, my brother, I kiss your black brow and wish my world was like my daughter's, where a teardrop would bring you back. You know, the more people who die around you, the more you realize that you're not getting younger. It really hurts when your schoolmate dies. The son is called Tara. Been meaning for some time to ask you for my white hoodie with my name airbrushed on the front and the graduation class on back. It's a keepsake, as you know. Then flipping through the papers, your face smiled through from the obituaries. They think we were lovers the way I bawled at your funeral. And since, as a pastor, your uncle said you were believing in God for a miracle, ask him why. He's allotted some the constant role of Job. Ask him why he allowed all those times on the badminton court at school, at competitions, those times on the phone, on the road, in front of your house, in Christmas, on the stairs, eating marshmallows. Cassandra D. We have many, many Cassandra D's in Jamaica and in the world. This thing is not a joke thing. Cassandra D, 50-something, has translucent eyes like those of a cat searching you for any form of guise. She loves the river and the sea, follows up the Rasta creed, slaps dominoes in the lane in the night, nursing a stalk of weed. Sometimes she goes into herself, feeling around in the dark. When she emerges, she issues words like guns, like dogs that bark. You see, Cassandra D and her typewriter taught adults how to read in a crevice in her neighborhood where the mood is always need, and where she thought words could shed light on a gloomy election year. But one night, men trashed her typewriter, paralyzed her with fear, and as they violated, they badgered and threatened her. If you keep one more meeting, we'll come back for you hear? And there were witnesses on the bed in the one-room tenement, a son from an uncle and a girl, an adopted dependent. Cassandra D no longer lives in a tenement in the lane. Her dad, once lost, then found, now dead, bought a house to ease her pain. But she goes into herself sometimes, feeling around in the dark. When she emerges, she issues words like guns, like dogs that bark. Surreal. Actually, I have two surreal poems, so this is surreal too. A usual Thursday morning in the tropics, sun, lots of it, and cars in traffic. Perhaps in one of them a child counts all the red cars or the white ones like I used to. I'm on my way to work with the sun, the cars, and the traffic light on red. Then the car shakes. There is no earthquake, but a man pasted on my window with charcoal skin, electrocuted hair. The light is still on red. He goes closer to the bonnet, but still by my window, and jerks his penis. The white of his eyes skyward till the light turns green, and I drive on. Anybody else have that experience? Am I the only one? Hey. Marcia. Fat, squat Marcia sits on the veranda of the Stonewall thing, passing as a veranda, with a headache, a la rum cream, and other spirits she nursed last night when some woman answered fair man phone. It's not that Jamaican woman calm when it comes to these things. It's not that we sit with a headache and bleach with rum over a cock. For Marcia, as soon as boss man gone, fly straight up the yard to ras up the woman. Yeah, woo. Why not? September 11, 1987. They killed Peter Tosh and there was blood on the TV floor when I closed my eyes, when I looked through the window. They killed the radio jock, Free Eye, with Tosh, and fear was my ally. Looking out through the window to the yard where any minute a gunman could come. There is no Bob, no Peter, no Free Eye. They're coming to kill us, the reggae lovers, the eyes green and gold, friendship band wearers with the radio dialed to an island lingua, and a one-drop cool breeze stepping razor reggae beat. You alright, Trudy? The Dance, 1986. Jerk smoke, expectation, the scent of the night. The big box booms, and the stars wash their faces to stay up for the dance. The cool and deadly queen reigns in the court. Her red riding hips rub and dub the man who winds her on the wall, the trunk of a tree, oblivious. Young eyes steal from sleep to let it in. One drop, dance hall, creation in the skin. Miss Cherry in a corner, slow pumping. The Dance, 2006. It threads the air like a kite unnerved. It envelops the Saturday night dance at tavern where men nurse guns and guineas, shifting their weight from foot to foot and eyes up and down the street. There's a room spray painted with blood that hasn't been rented in weeks. You pass there to go to the toilet. The blue convoy comes with its blinking like a warning. The dance pauses. Men stash their weed and guns into stalls, into car bonnets, and slink back into the black. When the convoy leaves, the dance swings back to waiting. Cat. The innocent will always get caught in a shootout and die. Why, just last night in Nannyville, a stone throw from the stadium, the wake was interrupted with shots. And according to the cops, the casualty dead on his back was a cat. Nameless, sexless, no outstanding mark, no alias, just cat. White Pui. W.S. Merwin, in his poem Summer Canyon, has a quote: "For each voiceless flower, there is a voice among the absent flowers." White Pui. Footsteps from my home, they chop you down. Prune, really. But for the waiting time, till you're a fountain again, it's a vicious butchering. A drought, where I find my God and pray anxiously for respringing. I kind of debated whether or not I should call W.S. Merwin's name, because I borrowed a W.S. Merwin book from somebody, and I kind of don't want to return it, Dr. Mark. So now I call it, you remember that I have the book, so I have to return it straight. Mango Song. This big bottom Julie remind me of a sweetie come brush me mango tree, with sweetie come brush me on the lawn of the house on Sunnyfield Drive in Havendale when the summer mango the air. It remind me of after school sucking a hairy till it grey, of a low limb that you sit on like a jockey, with Julie mango juice running down your hand quicker than your tongue can stop it. This big bottom Julie in front me make the mind think all things, like to just grab it and yummy. Once when I read that, a couple asked me, that question. Alright. Immerse. My hands duck the grey and black dress 3 times into the water before I hold it and scrub it with the brush. In this moment, I'm John baptizing my dress, then religion administering the ritual, scritch, 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 to free it of any signs of the rubber dub I hanker after, in a smouldering room with boom boxes and a man pinned to this grey and black dress that, when accessorized with pink snake skin belt, skirts, middle thigh. This one is "And These Two." No sound but the waves, a key and its coconuts, a dark sea as warm as breath, black pebbles scuttling up, black pebbles washing back, and these two cradled by the tide in each other. No sound but the waves. Ultrasound. Marilyn Monroe must have been like you, facing the camera from in the womb, with your face to the crowd posing, with even a foot waving, and your lips a thin cut of skin spread in a smile. Darling, this X-ray, my first pic of you, taken September 29, 2007, is too deep a walk in the brooding woods. Take it back, doctor. Tomorrow, give me an ultrasound of a child unwilling to face the camera. This one is Kayla's favorite poem, but I guess she's playing with Tassia, so she don't need to hear it. Baby on the Ball. It was just a ball in the air, but by the way baby cheered, you'd think I put on a show, like a clown in a big red bow with a sidekick and a water gun, who'd round and round a circle run. but it was just a ball I'd now and then let fall. Though you'd think it was some feat, like walking upside down through teeth, singing, oh, the Grand Old Duke wasn't a parachute with a G.I. Jane or the first drops of rain while my baby squealed and laughed and peeled. It was just a ball I bounced on the wall. But her mirth was so complete, I marveled at the feet of my baby. In awe, goggle-eyed, enthralled, a role reversed. I the babe, she the bouncing ball. For the mother and child. Blood seeped down into the veins of our earth, and I held my child and cried. For mother and child woke that Tuesday to die. I held my child and cried for the mother and child in Haiti, for the memory of Toussaint Dessalines, for the Haitians never mentioned in the books, for the Haitian with the monkey on his back. Pat Robertson and the others, tell me if you know, why was a black man's God a devil? Why was there a price for the air you breathe in Haiti? Blood seeped down into the veins of our earth, and I held my child and cried. Almost lost. Couldn't see you. I zoomed in, out, rotated, turned the frame upside down, and couldn't see you. I ate sand like road. You weren't by the boy with his father at Domino's, the boy you were scooping up sand with your pale pink plastic pencil case, collecting shells and flying on the Fort Clarence Beach swing with. You weren't in the waves or on their outskirts, building sandcastles or digging a trench. And as the lens focused, composed the scenes, you weren't right beside, in front, or behind me, but steps away, hunting in a mound of sand for shells. Steps away, but in the space I stood, frantic, frozen, frenetic steps. Prof, you recognize it? You recognize the skills that I got? Thank you. Alright, it's coming on Christmas. Skills that I got from a book that he loaned me. I'm not bragging, okay? Alright, Joni Mitchell has a song called River, and there's this part, it's coming on Christmas and stuff like that, right? So I stole that. It's November, and this year Christmas is just as near as it was last year this time. But this year it's further from our minds with chikungunya, the fear of Ebola, undermining all attempts at early Christmas cheer. And I remember at Christmas, and New Year's Eve more precisely, when on the way to chugging some liquor and preferably lewd dancing, we saw a Waterloo Road beggar's face we'd grown to know, crushed onto the townhouse wall on the road going down to Constant Spring, across from the Olympic athlete come gym instructor's gym. Eddie Bohr. Prof Bohr, I really wanted to go on Sunday because actually that was a dream of mine, to be in Port Antonio, to see you read poems in Port Antonio. I know that Marina poem is one that I love. When you saw the turtle, you went there with your dad. I love your Port Antonio poems. I love your poems a lot. Alright, so maybe you should close your ears, I would never tell him to his face that he reminds me of a banana. After all those years of bending ears to students lay waiting him at the door with almost inaudible questions. Know what? I take it back. Eddie Bohr is a sprig that when it bends to the wind lets loose seeds for germination. But that's not the poem. I really have nothing to say to this man who leaves me wide open like a 3-year-old's mouth watching Dora. Can't understand that, T. Stephen. Bearing witness from Mervyn Morris. You search the still water of memory. Examine the life caught in the same. The first day you saw him, he was standing in your class. No, you were sitting in his. The man who conjured a pond in your exams. No, he conjured that pond long before you came to know how poetry stands, travels far, burrows deeply. So the first day I saw him, I was in his class. The man whose father died and his mother cried, and her tears were his, and my eyes opened wide. His white beard jabbed the corner before his blue jeans, doctor's shirt, and the stars in his eyes seized the room, pinned by his baritone that dipped to bass like a bucket, plunged deep into the continent of Mervyn, then surfaced, brimming with laughter. And the class on the edge would draw near as he led us down the dark red lanes of Martin Carter, sat with us around the Singer sewing machine Goodison identified with her mother. And we eavesdropped with him as he eavesdropped with Senior gardening in the tropics. He'd use Bayram to clean the Mikey Smith cassette head. So we'd see the Legba walking, Orange Street fire talking man, then kill with a stone and stony him. And him plug that radar stuck in a Jean Binta Breeze head into Fiwi, and walk we on the street with Oko, Linton, Muta with him patty pan. And the class on the edge would draw nearer. As he drew nearer to Miss Lou, and we peered into the pool of Caribbean poetry. And it was Mervyn Morris who inflicted the love pangs of John Donne, W.B. Yeats upon us. He brought life pouring out from the depths of souls to his class that is not and was never contained on the Mona campus. He was already poet laureate. His progeny, many. And I, manuscript in hand, like the generations of others, negotiate the wet summer, the grass growing lush, the path to Mervyn Morris, tennis ball, poem bouncer, Rhodes scholar, Rye, Quicksilver, star eye, Don Drummond fan, generous, magic poem man, fathomless, the pond. So, how do you bear witness? You search the water, examine the life in the Seine, recommit every detail, then slip them back in, then roll your world back up to a scroll, unfold it, breathe, begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Margaret. Can we have another round of applause for Anne-Margaret Lynch? Our other reader this evening is Millicent Graham, who, like Anne-Margaret, has published widely in journals and anthologies. She's also the author of 2 books. The Damp in Things, published in 2009, and The Way Home, published in 2014, very recently, both by People Tree Press. In 2009, she was one of the 17 writers selected for the University of Iowa's International Writing Program, which is a 3-month residency. She was a fellow at the Breadloaf Writers Conference in Middlebury, Vermont in 2010. Millicent is co-founder of the Drawing Room Project, which began in 2007 as a series of what they call creative conversations, mainly workshops productions and exhibits. It is my pleasure to introduce the author of The Damp in Things and The Way Home, Millicent Graham.
Thank you, Professor. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to Professor Morris and to the National Library of Jamaica for giving us the opportunity to share our work. It's not often you get to read to such a receptive audience for such a long time. I'm going to read from The Damp in Things and also from The Way Home. I'm going to start with The Way Home, and I might just mix it up a bit. I'm not very good with the preambles. Lobe. The Queen Kong's lobe, pressing the ocean will, someday turn up lost on a sandspit full of her memory's echo. I lie awake, grudgingly dug from sand, one ear pressed against the night slab, harboring house noises. The pace of an old clock, militant in its rounds, the croaker mistaken for an insomniac bird, the flap, flap, flapping of a list of things to do. Impatient though the world is bedded down, and the three-blade fan raging on. Further away, a child sobs over a dream broken by a grown-up's assault, head full of shards that she may never mend. These sounds fill this cavity and keep rest at bay. For women who pull covers to their chins and listen for movements radial to the main. Not for them, splay of the night surf slap, cajoled by the piping rhythm of a soundboy selector in the distant gap, lulling the street, muting the grins of harder shells, till night's drunk shadows hug a speaker box. House heavy with this air is a place to outgrow. Carry me then on an island's pulse to surface on a spit somewhere. A lot of the poems in this book is centered around my, I was gonna say my childhood home, but it's still my home. It's Cassia Park off Gleeville Avenue, which is off Cassia Park Road. There's a lovely picture of the old bridge on the cover of the book, which is by Michael Brooks. So I've grown up there my whole life, and it's a collection of important memories and images that sort of come to me and collect in this collection. I'm going to read a series called Somewhere Sunday, and I don't know how many of you get up early on Sunday morning to go to church, like 7:30 service. I used to have to do that. Now luckily I get to stay till 12. I hope Robert isn't here. But this is Somewhere Sunday, and it's a mixture of what I'd rather be doing on a Sunday when I was a child, or ideas of my parents' childhood and my childhood all thrown into one. Somewhere Sunday. 1. Men pull on white trousers and leave their beds lingering in lost innings, while the hats of lovers tilt for a prayer to tighten love's knees and love's resolve. The pitch loosens its moisture, shirts come undone, creased Bibles, bare flesh and ribbing, and the sun on the rooftop of the pavilion plays moonlight like a three-card man on the eyes of a bowler who is swinging his judgment arm on a nerve and a naked stump. 2. A pressure cooker whistles, drowns in a loud kiss teeth. A pudding pan piles its lumpy batter till the dents are scraped finger clean. The smell of seasoned coconut milk drowns the nostril, and river babies and moonshine darlings cup themselves before jumping and cannonball. Sound smashes, then splutters of water. Careless, laughter is burbling in the surge. The tree grating moonlight and throw its powder on turned up faces. The women are striking the hide of black Bibles. Their faces turned up are gasping swimmers that surface, then dip, then surface again. The old men rattle teeth and cough from the striking on their backs, from being loved too tightly. The way home is a woman striking asphalt on black spike heels, ignoring the moonlight's threat to makeup an itch of nylon stockings with a paper napkin crushed into a ball, batting across her blazing temples. I could do with a napkin. Christmas was. This is for my father. Christmas was the icy mint breath you always gave me, the sermon's dimmed light called to the Christmas star, a sleeved head ascending the pulpit as I found sleep in the hollow of your armpit. It was copper gilding on white coconut flakes, my burning knuckles mistaken for raw lumps, passed too close to a grater's perforations. I winced and flashed the sting away. I learned to cook as Beckno told stories of hat pins. His mother used to prod him. Hungry he spun the kitchen bitch till its blunt point landed, then ate the winnings, veined kidney pegs of tangerine. These were the things that made a season bright. Once in the dark, I sat up and stared at the sky, a whale captured in a pane of glass, my eyes running over silver scales. I swore I saw a host of reindeer pulling you away. Now outside, the red Once in the dark, I sat up and stared at the sky, a whale captured in a pane of glass, my eyes running over silver scales. I swore I saw a host of reindeer pulling you away. Now, outside, the red kettle has the allure of a browning. She rings the bell for young men to turn out their pockets and force the odd bill through, a narrow slit that favors her parted lips. The good plates and silver do not match. The domino table is a dusty computer stand. We make a meal out of few ingredients, charity and hope and sleep from faithfulness. For Wayne Brown. a horse's lament. In the dim, I study a mountain's form and nod its meter as its cardiogram echoes from Stony Hill to Boscobel. I keep vigil, believing dawn and that language of ours. Curled fists and tightened knees when we sped away, and new lines like the one the wind piled in our ears and flings at your sore lips. Horse without rider is beast. My heart, saddled, ridden thing, whinnies in its dread stable and asks, when will the rooster clear his throat and scratch the sun from its hole and sun suck night off the cold roof? When will the watchful shuttle squint from light and figure limbs to glowing filament? When will dark move out our way and show your hand cupped sweet lump rose apple? I straddle a moment that has no sound of pupils startled shuffling in sockets with fixed upon once knowing flesh, cajoling rider's bone. A smudge of breath, closely a second smudge, then slip, my stirrup separates from soul. The mountain moved. I heard no thud. Life kept on reeling, and earth, accustomed to its spooling film, was not prepared for the swish at the end. For night on the ground again, spreading fast as if spilt. For strange sounds, the foreign tongue of a boot, striking springless earth, the pellets measuring, rattling the trough, the loosening of the girth. And talked about the poetry. Everybody seems to have a nostalgia for poetry. So this is my poet poem. Your palm slides into mine soft. Without flinching, you ask, take me to the avenue where poetry spread wide canopies, your eyes catatonic, ridden by leaves that form like gilding on vaulted memories. Give me that city street, give me a dream, where poet light scales buildings as they scrape the belly of a sky too big, too blue, and sweep the poet cabs that litter the avenue, where women brush their almost poet hair from poet skin and poet scented nape. But all I see is a wire fan rape. Know the sallow earth clumping while the moon in my hand rises on the grate of a wooden handle. Away, light scuttles, wind at your brow, you suckle childhood, reluctant to fall from its stem. Cold knuckles unclasp a coat's hard buckle, you loosen. The years and years of bellies bursting blue and gold fandangles that dress the branching families left here to rake the rotting poems. So, this year I was fortunate to be invited to participate in a project called the Empire Cafe in Scotland. And myself and a number of other Caribbean writers, Tommy Dawes, Camilla, Tanya is still here, we were asked to contribute to an anthology. I started me writing a number of poems, started to do some research, and I became very interested in sugarcane. And one of the things I learned, being a person who grew up in Kingston, not in the country, one of the things I learned was that a ratoon is a way to plant sugarcane. What you do, you have a nice joint of sugarcane, you cut about 2 of the joints and you press that into the earth, and that is a ratoon, and the sugarcane will grow from there. So this is a poem from the anthology. We know what we have buried here. We know what we have buried here. We know who sinks the raccoons deep and hope that gold tartans will shoot from ground where all our suffering keeps. Black sweat still soak up wholesale cotton. The engine only freed the mule. Women still bundle up the cane and take their burdens to the truck. And children loitering at the gate feel in their pockets. They know that the fortnight's pay long promised out, that hand will only box them out. We know what we have buried here. We know who sinks the raccoons deep and hope that gold tartans will shoot from ground where all our suffering keeps. Better, they say it deep like prayer, deep in the ash, deep in the rose. It does not matter how much years, it does not matter uncured scars. The cane piece reaps us all, the last leaves nothing that the fire leaves. Every new generation will be laid in heaps by the ratcheting arm. We know what we have buried here. We sink the raccoons deep and hope that gold tartans will shoot from where our sufferings keep. So the project, it looked at Scotland's relationship with the transatlantic slave trade, and it got me writing a number of other pieces, and I'm just going to share a couple of those poems, and well, one more, and then I'm going to share some of those poems with you that I'm working on. Alright, eating cane. So at work, you know, cane is a big deal. I can't get cane off the trolley. You know, as the trolley comes, the call center ladies, they get all the sugar cane and left with smoochies, crackers, and sweeties. So this is eating cane. Used to find you on the corner street, bossy in the hand cart, fanned like tail feathers. But nowadays, hand cart's scarce, and you turn elite, chilling in the fridge section, ready to eat. Or on the trolley, that trolley ladies wheel towards workers emerging from cubicles. $80 for a plate of cane, chopped on stainless steel countertops and wrapped tight so that they don't get stale. Not like the big stalks I used to clear and strip the red joints with bare teeth. No slurp to catch the excess juice. Some always end up running down my chin. Nah, these youngsters can't know. I hear them sucking the easy sweet till trash is silken and then the discreet twang palmed into a napkin while grandma's machete dulls in the back kitchen. So, I'm also working on this collection of love poems. And I'm going to read 3 poems. I don't know how my phone is, I can. I'm going to read 3 poems from that selection. Maybe a couple more. The Making House. 1. Fatal on waves of sand, the figure of a dugout canoe lies oiled in moonlight. It's back to us, the brighter boats out far have left this Ulster here with me to die. Except for moments of spindrift, the bay is tar, and nothing moves above me like your smile, opening and closing, my eyes drunk on stars, toes dipping salt, yet no anchor for my own weight, crust carried for years. That boat could hold us both if only we could call ourselves into its opening. This coast, yes, yes. a space dug out for salvaged bark, and scores of lives that braced inside its arc. Two. Salt food, so many failures. Tonight the whitefish is bathed in lime and covered with eggplant, flesh baked for hours. This remedy calls for sprinkled time. These days, nothing gets battered. We chop in silence, pray and pray. You for a heart meal, me for more time, for things that matter. To eat from the same plate is half a cure. To watch the crowd rush the fishing boats, then recede, or the brown pelican fall on the bay like a dagger, slammed sharply into a cutting board. I need more. But like the hermit who waits to an attacker and drags its softness deep inside some shell, he knows a tasteless life is its own self. 3. I kept the shell from the summer at Jake's and often pressed my ear to the vacant place. Enduring salt I could not wash away. Try as I might, there was always sea's trace. Oh, slug in my chest, so uncomfortable, the muscle barely moves. Fearful that each turn is a hope that stabs and stabs, that gnawed flesh brittles as it comes to choose one space for another. I conjure you here, still in beach trunks, dark from the navel up, holding your unearthed gift as if it were an engaging thing, shed of your love, a fear outgrown. You promise me to stay, not a house abandoned by the sea. Weather tempo. The first words come short. A chase of rain in drought time that raises everything to ghost flesh. The grill gate, the bark on edge-dwelling trees. To run your hand over it feels grey gravel. Make charms for fern. To wear pearls like a prissy girl who risked nothing for shame and dangles and dangles and dangles. Soon as you feel a dampness to slip into, the scorch lick you and it's drought again. Fern shrivel like shame, old lady. The trees that nodded yes, yes, have nothing to say. The grill gate stiffens. To run your hand on it will burn. Alright, I'm gonna read Dawn and okay, this one. Dawn. Your shadow climbs on top my half of the divan. The damp patch of you is cooled by an oscillating fan. Underneath, a fitted sheet forgets, losing its crush to a day not yet solid, but a cut of gentian violet. Sleep till I come. I go with the worn-out moon to Coronation to buy ground provision from women with dirt-dried aprons and earth stains on the crescent nails, bundled in bales. Women like crushed leaves, staining the lining of hand-me-down linen skirts. Women bitter like medicine, calling out from yawning holes the names of diggings, their eyes on my bosom. Calling out from leaning to one side, I tell time, by the lift of dust the smell of my pits. I know that the dew on your forehead soon drop like ripe pear, purple and dangling. Picking between death or dying, I whisper, stay. To the moon, leaving me to carry the crocus, and don't rise up to the sun. Sleep, sleep till I come. Don't rise up till I come. So, I'm gonna just finish with two more poems. I'm gonna read Rain Days, which is a title poem for the damping things. And then I'll read one more. Rain Days. I watched with weightlessness little ones, bursting puddles as they pushed off with naked soles against the wet road, chasing shoes. The gutters broke, torrents usurped their leather boats. The streets were patent where sudden girls wiggled on tiptoe, their tunic hems hoisted to expose clear beads in mid-swell. I was heavy, too heavy for rain jewels. My mother said, tie your shoes lace. Mine cloud water pools. No, only the dry, not this ink for rain days. No regrets like a ringworm. Bluing and young limes cannot heal. These feet that restrain the heart and kept me raw, far from the damp instinct. I used to have a whole lot of paw cuts. I don't know. Does that date me? And we used to be afraid of the dark. My brothers used to try to, lighten the mood by making all sorts of hand puppets, but I was terrified. Well, one brother would do that. The other one would tell me ducky stories. But these days, there's so much other things to be afraid of. And so, this is for everybody going home. Hope JPS prevails. Prayer for morning. Leslie. What? Say that? I said something. Prayer for morning. The moon is rising on the hill's back. My mother is not home as yet, and in the corner, inky and black, the daddy long legs plot and plot. The candles dart their tongues like spears, the light that ought to lick our fears, instead climbs curtains, clambers chairs, to start a burning spring of tears. We clasp our hands, we say our prayers. Please let the morning find us here. Outside lizards kibber their sounds, and crickets trading violins for thunderclaps and silvery live rounds, while daddy longlegs weave in homes. An old dog pokes its nose and barks, piercing my ear, scratching his mark. Holes in the walls, holes in the heart. The moon is cold, the lanes are dark. We clasp our hands, we say our prayers. Please let the morning find us here. Lock up the Louvre latch, the grill gate, out every candle that might light the corners where daddy longlegs wait. Only mother must know this hiding place. The outside shadows secrets keep, so mind the door and fight out sleep. The moon's face holds, breath taken deep, afraid for the daddy longlegs creep. So clasp your hand and say your prayers. Please let the morning find us here. And thank you very much, Professor, because without your encouragement and your first read, I wouldn't have a second book. So thank you. Good night.
Another round of applause, please, for Millicent Graham. I think there are some refreshments that have been circulating and there may be some left. So please join us after this. It remains for me to say thanks to Bukophilia for having us here. Thanks to the National Library for preparing everything and making this possible. Some of you who might like to know that one of our good poets who doesn't live here at the moment, Pamela Mordecai, will be doing a reading at Bookland, I don't know the time, on Saturday. Bookland in New Kingston on Saturday. At 2 o'clock. Bookland, 2 o'clock, Saturday, Pamela Mordecai. I'd like to thank Christine Leng and the team from the National Library for all that they have done to make this evening possible. But above all, we want to thank again our two poets this evening, Anne Margaret Lim and Millicent Graham. And finally, may I remind you that, especially if you feel like taking a turn out of town, next week, Thursday, in Mandeville, at the Cecil Charlton Hall, the readers in this mini-series will be Earl Mackenzie and Jean Goulburn. Thank you again to Anne Margaret and Millicent.
Professor,